Welcome everyone to our Thursday English language research seminars for the IU Ukraine Non-Residential Scholars Program. We have two wonderful talks scheduled for today, so welcome everyone. Glad you could join us. My name is Sarah Phillips. I'm a professor of anthropology at Indiana University, and it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Anna Prokhorova. It's especially a pleasure for me as I am partnering with Dr. Prokhorova in the program this year. Dr. Prokhorova holds a PhD degree in sociological sciences. She has 14 years of experience conducting research in sociology and oral history, and she specializes in investigations based on qualitative sociological methodology and related to doing sensitive research on traumatic experiences. She has been teaching for 9 years in the Department of Sociology at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. I'm going to let Anna tell you more about her research interests and her project for the virtual residency, but I'll just mention that the title of her talk today is Theoretical, Methodological, and Ethical Principles of Sensitive Research in the Study of Traumatic Experiences of the Russian-Ukrainian War. So without further ado, Anna Prokhorova, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Sarah, and thank you, colleagues, for being here and for this opportunity to speak to you. So I will try to share my presentation. Is it okay?
Looks good.
Okay. So as Sarah has already said, my name is Anna, and I'm working at the sociological department of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. And my research interests lie somewhere in between of sociology and oral history. My project here under the scholarship of Indiana University is not about research, but rather about teaching, I guess, because my idea is to write a manual on methodological and ethical peculiarities of conducting sensitive research. And to my mind, it's really up to date now and here, I mean, during our war and in Ukraine. So let's go step by step. We can start with definition, a few words about what sensitive research is. There are two ways to define the sensitive research. When we are defining vulnerable, we can define it as through the social groups, either through groups who are sensitive or through topics which are sensitive. So when we are defining vulnerable social groups or social categories, we may speak about some marginalized and stigmatized groups or categories which suffer harm or potentially can suffer harm during our research, in our research. And when we are defining the sensitive research through sensitive topics, we also can speak about topics that potentially can harm the researched community. Can harm the research community and can cause different, not very pleasant emotions. However, in any way, it's really hard to divide topics which are sensitive, or we may say that it's hard to divide researchers, sensitive researchers, from just ordinary researchers, and it's rather hard to cross this line. Because to my mind, almost every topic in different circumstances, in different contexts, can become sensitive. But on the other hand, it's also obvious that, for example, such topics that are connected to fears, to death, or, for example, to sexuality, will more likely be sensitive in different contexts than other topics. And to my mind, ignoring of the methodological and ethical differences and difficulties in researching sensitive topics is, we may say, socially and academically irresponsible, because it can potentially lead both to false conclusions and, as a result, to wrong theories which will be built on these false conclusions, or it's even worse, to not very correct or bad policies that will be implemented based on these false conclusions, and to traumatization or even re-traumatization of people that we work with. And after February 2022, we may see a huge growth of the number of different studies focused on recording all the experience that people gain around, and usually it's a rather traumatic experience connected to, I don't know, occupation, evacuation, loss of relatives or friends, or, for example, acquisition of disability. And it's totally understandable. It's totally normal reaction of researchers, the desire to fix, to record, and then to analyze all this crazy, all this scary social reality, social environment around us. But yeah, and it's great that there are a lot of projects. I'm sure that all this material will be really very valuable, really treasure in a long distance perspective. But my point is that we need to conduct all this research correctly. And correctly here means just two things. The first is that the safety of research participants should be our priority, and we should think about this safety component on every stage of our research, starting with writing very precisely of our informed concern, and ending with, for example, debriefing of our research team, or, for example, making decisions of where and how we will keep this collected data. And the second point is that all the results and conclusions of our research of this vulnerable group or vulnerable category or vulnerable community should benefit of this group. Here is a bad example of, it's just from the literature, it's a bad example of how you should not formulate the topic, because in this way we marginalized our vulnerable group even more. So our research doesn't bring any benefits. It's even makes the situation worse.
Anna, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you mean to be advancing your slides? We're only seeing the first slide. We only see the
I'm
first
changing
slide.
them. Sorry.
Maybe go into full screen mode or presentation mode.
One moment. Maybe I will stop share because I'm in a full screen mode from my side.
I see.
So I'll try one more time. Maybe like this without full screen.
Okay, now yes, if you do it like that, we can see. So just so you know, we've only seen the first slide.
Okay, so it was about sensitive research and defining it. Then it was the idea that we need to conduct our research correctly. And these are two theses. So I'm stopped with this bad example of formulating the topic, the research topic, because this, our challenge here starts from formulating research topic or even research question. And here we may see that not every formulation is good, and not every formulation bring some positive changes, or at least can be some kind of a push or impetus of positive changes. This one obviously marginalized our research community. So now I will speak a little bit about the methodology itself. To my mind, the best methodology of gathering sensitive data or data in sensitive research is in-depth interview. Of course, there could be some exceptions, but in general, according to the interpretive research paradigm, the in-depth interview are best for exploring those meanings that our actors or representatives of communities that we are interested in put in their actions, or for example, the reality around them. So if we want to hear how the representatives of our research community understand anything, and if we don't want to bring our own cultural capital or life experience into this interpretation, or we can say in terms of Bourdieu, if you don't want to influence our symbolic violence, then it's better to ask our subjects themselves. So the best way is just to ask our subjects. Besides, psychologists say that this interview format is natural for us as human beings. And in a sensitive research, it's very important that we can establish a good contact with our informants. Or what is even more important, extremely important, that this in-depth interview methodology gives us an opportunity, a space for, it's better to say that it gives the opportunity and the space for our informants to speak about their traumatic experience. We may even say to speak their trauma through. And it's a rather important point. We will come back to it a few times. So the next few slides will be about a feature, or we may say a skill or a ability that, to my mind, is crucial in in-depth interviews. We call it active listening. In qualitative sociology or in oral history, despite general ideas of how the roles in the interview are divided, the interviewer should be more a person who listens than a person who asks. And this active listening, this ability, this skill, it helps us to encourage our informants to talk to us and support their talking. From the methodological perspective, as I have already said, we are interested in giving space to a narrator, to an informant, in order to minimize our symbolic violence. And in this case, active listening is one of the key tools that we can use for doing this. In the same time, from the ethical perspective, we are interested in minimalization of emotional stress of our narrators, of our informants, and we are interested in supporting them, supporting their emotional stability. And in this case, this active listening is also a key tool that we can use, because telling story is not the same that answering questions. This level of relief that our narrator can feel in the end of telling story is it has totally different level than in the end of answering questions. So we create this space and place for reflection to our narrator. And it's very important to highlight that we are not therapists, we are researchers. But I'm sure that we need to understand and to consider the fact that only this creation of the place and space for reflection is enough for the majority of people to reflect their traumatic experience. So again, we are not therapists, but I think it's better to not to protect that there is no elephant in the room. It's better to cope somehow with this elephant, and to at least to consider this situation, to think about this. So it's about this therapeutic effect that can occur during the interview situation. But I want to highlight also here that it's very important that our informants should be ready to speak with us. So they really need to understand why we are asking them to speak. They really need to understand what research is we conducting, and their consent should be well informed and well considered. And now I think it's logical to speak a little bit about this dilemma, or we may say about this tension of the need to speak and the need to remain silent. I will tell a few words about these quotations, or somewhere it's just retelling of the ideas, because I used Ukrainian translation and then translated it into English. It could be not quotations but retellings, but these are researchers and professionals who deal with trauma and traumatic experience and traumatic testimonies in their own professional fields, different professional fields. For example, Dari Laup was a famous psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and he worked with he was a Holocaust survivor by himself, and he worked a lot with this testimonies about Holocaust. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, he was born in Chernivtsi in Ukraine, in Ukrainian territory. For example, Robert J. Lifton is also a psychiatrist, and he is famous for working with traumatic experience of those who was engaged in a war experience. He by himself served in the United States armed forces during the Korean War, and was dealing with this experience during his research. And for example, Shoshana Feldman, I think she's the most famous. She's a well-known literary critic or literary, literary theorist, literary critic, let's say. And she also was doing was coping with this traumatic experience, traumatic testimonies, but in the field of literature. And I took all these quotations from the book made by Katie Carruth, Professor Katie Carruth, who conducted interviews with all these people. So these were interviews about doing interviews on traumatic experience. And this book is translated into Ukrainian. So if you are interested in this field, it's really worth to read. So to make a long story short, it's quite natural that that people want to speak about their traumatic experience. Because it's a great opportunity to structure this this experience, this different disparate events into some one line and to understand them. It's also a great opportunity to make this tragic, this frightening experience like valuable or meaningful. Besides, it's a relief just to tell about your experience and to share it with somebody. And it's very important not to feel this survival guilt. I think now in our society we talk about this a lot. So, for example, according to Ralph Linton, it's very important to transfer this survivor's guilt into a responsibility to talk about the life, about the story, just to tell the story of those who can't tell it by themselves. But at the same time, of course, there are a lot of factors that that are opposite to those ones, and these opposite factors stop people from sharing their traumatic experience. For example, we may say about this shame or survival guilt, as I have already said, or people usually devaluate their own personal experience and don't want to speak about it, to talk about it, because they think it's not meaningful. Or, for example, we may speak about the difficulty of putting this traumatic experience into any words, difficulty of explaining this traumatic experience. And of course, this huge factor is a lack of interested listener. It's understandable that not everybody and not always is ready to hear something terrible, something horrible, and it's on individual level. And on the level of society, we also already know it from our own experience. We are in the middle of war, but there are narrations, there are discussions about rebuilding and so on and so on. So society may want more to move forward than to analyze its past. Besides, we may speak about such a factor when potential listeners just worry that they can harm potential narrators, and they just don't ask. I put here a quotation from my interview with a military man, soldier, who was fighting in the Russian-Ukrainian war in 2014-2015. Then he was a veteran of this war, and now he obviously is also on the front line. So this quotation is about that the idea that you should not ask veterans about their traumatic experience is extremely wrong from the point of view of this person. So I will read some part of this quotation. The thing is that all the veterans, or at least most of us, dream of being asked. They really want to share what they have experienced, but they are ashamed to impose their experience on other people because they think that they can offend someone, that it is simply rude to impose, and so on. But they dream of being asked. Everyone dreams very much. And one moment, I will move this. And it's very, very rare to have an opportunity to experience this. Experience this, he means experience this interview situation where he had an opportunity to speak about his traumatic experience. So, all these and other factors cause a situation where it's easier to remain silent than to speak through your traumatic experience. And it's not very good because silence hurts. In the personal perspective, the avoidance of the traumatic experience is much worse than an attempt to analyze it, to understand it, to reflect it. And in the social perspective, it is very, very hard to, or almost impossible, to overcome cultural trauma for a society without talking it through. So my point is, if we are sure that we can conduct research or collect any testimonies about our contemporary war, it is worth to do it. I even want to quote my students when we were speaking with my students last spring on very similar topics. One of them told me, perhaps if we were better listeners to our veterans who were fighting in 2014, 2015, if we were more open to their experience, perhaps there would be no full-scale invasion, or at least we would be much better prepared for it. So if we are sure that we can conduct a research, if we are sure that we can listen, we are able to listen, it's worth to do it. But, and this will be the last part of my speech today, I want to end with this part, which, or this subtopic, this part, which become more popular recently, I mean recent decades. I started from the idea that the safety should be our priority during all the stages of our research, and we were talking more about our informants, our representatives of our research community. But it's also important to speak about representatives of our research team as well. Here I want to formulate it, this idea in a statement that sensitive research, or even a separate sensitive interview, can be or is more or less traumatic experience for everyone from our research team. So to minimize this traumatization, we need to cope with this traumatic experience, and yeah, we can see here on the slide some threats that can hurt researchers. For example, some emotional exhaustions, or worries about our respondents, or feeling of guilty because of the impossibility of changing anything or changing something. And such emotions can can move into can even move into some physical physical consequences for us, or for example some psychological mechanisms as the last two ones. And here I wrote only about this emotional dimension. There is also a physical dimension, but maybe it's too much to speak about everything. So my point is that it's very important to think through all the steps of our research, and to think about our team as well, and to try to minimize our own traumatization. And we can do it at least and for the most in the same way like we are doing it with our informants. So this idea of talking through our trauma, or talking our trauma through, is also works also in this case. So, for example, debriefing in any forms, in written form, in oral form, debriefing inside of the team or with professionals, is also a great tool that we can use, or the most effective tool that we can use to be sure that our team will be okay, our team will be safe, and our research will not traumatize ourselves. So to sum up, my 30 minutes are already gone. To sum up, I want to say that we need, I want to repeat this point, that we need to think about the safety of all the participants of our research. And it's really worth to conduct any research if we are sure that our informants are ready to speak with us, and if we are ready to listen to our informants. We have enough resources, enough abilities to listen to them. So thank you very much for your attention. I will be very happy, will be very glad if you share your thoughts about all of this. Maybe you will share some thoughts about your researchers and your experience with researching sensitive topics, or something about this, around this.
Thank you so much, dear Anna, for this wonderful, informative, timely, and very important presentation. I am stepping in, dear colleagues. So the floor for our discussion is open. So could you please ask your questions or maybe share your comments? Maria, please.
Thank you for your presentation, and I have two questions. The first, as an ethicist, I'm very interested in what do you mean while talking about ethical? That what content do you think, or do you mean while talking about ethical? It's the first question, and the second question is more wide down. While talking about, you mentioned the Holocaust, researchers who research Holocaust. What do you think? What about some restrictions or maybe specifics of our using of Holocaust researchers methodology for our work with victims, or maybe of people, now these sensitive groups in Russian-Ukrainian war? Because it's question for me is important, because also I read some books on Holocaust oral history and used the ideas, the approaches the authors mentioned there, and are these approaches relevant to our situation, and how can we use directly, or maybe with some modifications? Thank you.
Yeah, Maria, thank you for your questions. Yeah, Yeah, about ethical stuff, ethical peculiarities. I'm going to stop on some crucial things. For example, on informed consent. It's such a document. I don't know. Do you deal with it or no? Do you conduct such researchers? For example, oral history researchers. Unfortunately, in our country, usually or sometimes or often, this document is just a formality, but in such researches that we can divide as sensitive ones, to my mind, it's very important to write it carefully and cope with it carefully, and our informants or potential informants should really read it carefully and understand what they are dealing with. So we put all the pros and cons, for example, potential risks in this document, and show all the picture where this data will be kept, why we are gathering this data, what topic we are exploring, and so on and so on. And it's very important for our informants to make considered concern to take part in our research. Another ethical issue, for example, it's confidentiality. It's a huge question. For example, in sociology, usually it doesn't matter with whom we're speaking or whom we're speaking with. It can be just social portrait of a person, but in some researchers in oral history as well, I think it's more important to name the names of our informants, of our respondents. And it's always a dilemma, should we anonymize our informants, or should we not do this? And in any case, I think we should ask themselves what shall we do and what will be good for them. There are some, these two are the biggest issues, ethical issues to my mind, but there are a lot of peculiarities on every step of doing sensitive research that are connected to ethics as well. For example, in the end, I think it's a very good idea to show our transcription of the interview to our informant and allow him or her to read it and to agree with it. And it's okay even at this last step if he or she will say, no, I don't want my testimonies be in your archive or your collection. So I think that in such researchers, we should think a lot about ethical dimension and wage all these small questions. We should always think about safety of our informants, and this ethical dimension is really very connected smoothly to this safety issue, safety question. And about the Holocaust survivors or relevancy of their testimonies, actually, here I put these quotations because of the idea that after the Holocaust, during maybe few years after the Holocaust, there were a lot of evidences in different forms. People wanted to share their experience. They were writing books or writing diaries. They were giving interviews. And in a few years, this growth of discourse about Holocaust survivors decrease a lot. And to my mind, it's partly because of the fact that there were no not so much people who were ready to listen to such a traumatic experience and to become these active listeners or just listeners for those who wanted to share this experience. So here I put it these quotations in this perspective. But in general, of course, our modern researchers or our researchers of our contemporary war differs with our researchers of Holocaust or Holodomor or any historical topics, because now we are inside of this historical event or event that will become historical in some time perspective, and it has its influence on us. That's why when people asking, what do you think? Do we need to write these testimonies, or can we call this oral history? I'm not sure. There are a lot of questions, and to tell the truth, I don't have all the answers on them. I'm not sure. Is it already oral history? Should we should we use this methodology, which is built on reflection, when we are inside of these events? I'm not sure, for example. So as a sociologist, I'm more sure that we need to cope with these researchers, and as oral historian, I'm not. I think that in some time perspective, it will be, this material, this collected material will be much valuable, we may say. So of course, we need to read anything we can read about this traumatic experience, or testimonies about traumatic experience, but I'm not sure that our case is the same, because we are inside of these events.
Thank you, Maria, for those wonderful questions, and Anna for your responses. We have some questions in the chat from Mikola Homanyuk. I think you were going to go next, Mikola.
Thank you. Brilliant presentation. I have four questions, but with a similar meaning. What do you think about involving people with similar or not similar and traumatic experience as interviewers? And does peer-to-peer approach work in that case? And the third question, what is more important for you, to achieve a research objective or provide therapeutic assistance, therapeutic help for respondents? And how, what do you mean, what do you think, how would interfere to achieve research objectives for you? All my questions are in chat. You can.
Yes, thank you very much for a lot of questions. I will try to answer them. About a similar experience, I think that it's okay to have similar experience, and it's even good to have similar experience. Then you can be much more empathic. But your traumatic experience should already be reflected, understood, and worked through before you become an interviewer and communicate with more vulnerable people. With vulnerable people, okay, let's say like this. So I think it's okay if we have the same experience. It's even one of recommendation to cope with researchers or interviewers who have the same or common experience, but these people really need to cope with their own experience before going into any research. Yeah, because it's totally not okay when the interviewer starts being more emotional than the informant, and it's not okay when informant start to help the interviewer. So I think it's a very bad situation. About this therapeutic effect, I will maybe highlight one more time that we don't need to be therapists. We are not therapists. We always need to have, for example, contacts of psychologists or some I don't know, groups of who can help a person to deal with his or her experience, and we shall always have an opportunity to give such contacts to our informants. So our idea is to collect data and then to analyze it. I'm not sure that it's going to be objective in any way, because all these qualitative methods are rather subjective, or at least it's another very big question, and I'm not sure that we have enough time to speak about it now, but I insert this slides about therapeutic effects only with the idea that we are giving this effect anyway. That's why we need to consider it at least. So do we want or don't we want? We create this situation of interview where our informant can reflect and analyze his or her experience, and for majority of people who had traumatized experience, it's enough to cope with their trauma. So we just need to, at least we need to consider this fact, I think. But of course we are not psychologists, we are not therapists, and it shouldn't be our primary goal, to my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mikola. Thank you, Anna. I'd like to acknowledge a really good point that came out in the chat from Nadia Honcharenko. I think it's more in response to the previous question or that you before Mikola. And she says, as Helenada Hrinchenko says, what is happening today has an indirect and usually very distant relationship to oral history as a scholarly method. It is more about documenting, recording testimonies, recording stories, but mostly not about oral history as an academic field with its own research methods and principles. And I know that there have been debates, between sort of the field of oral history and the field of sociology about the appropriateness of interviews in this traumatic time. So do you have any thoughts on that, Anna, or responses to Nadia's insight there?
Yeah, actually, in this point, I agree with Helenada Hrinchenko, because all this oral history methodology built on reflection, and it really needs some time perspective. Actually, if we have time, I can tell you a story about my respondent with whom I spoke about his war experience in 2021. And we were speaking about the beginning of the war. Then he became a soldier again after February 22. He was injured in the first days, and almost during a year he was coping with his physical traumas, so he wasn't on a front line. And I decided that I thought that his this part of the war, his war, has already ended almost a year ago. Maybe he already has this reflection perspective. And I was wrong. I conducted another interview, and I could compare these two audios, these two texts. They were totally different, even from the point of view of philology. He used totally different constructions. He was talking about not about some situations or people or his feelings. He just was very critical to our authorities and so on and so on. So it was a totally different person. So it's for me it's one more one more example, one more point that we really need to if we want to have such interviews that we are used to in the oral history, we really need to wait a little bit when all these events will become a history. Then we will get these stories about this historical period. But if we are ready just to cope with this contemporary experience with maybe a little bit more emotional experience, with emotional stories, emotional and subjective and like like not cooked dish, but just meat, vegetables, and fruits. If we are ready to cope with such a material, of course we can conduct our researchers now, and we can conduct interviews now.
Thank you, Anna. If I may, I'll ask a question. I know that for your project, you're working on a manual, sort of not a textbook per se, but a handbook or a manual in conducting interviews on sensitive topics. Could you tell us a little bit about your vision for that manual? What's the purpose? Who will be the users for the manual, etc.?
Yes, thank you for your question. Actually, I talked a little bit in the beginning of my speech about this enormous growth of different researchers after February 2022. And, not only sociologists or oral historians or whoever started to conduct these interviews, started to collect these testimonies, people from other fields, for example, I don't know, ethnologists or philologists or journalists, or somebody who knew about the interview methodology from at least some perspective. They started to collect all this data. So my idea is to make this manual mainly not for sociologists, for example, or at least not for the qualitative sociologists, but for those who maybe have never dealt with such sensitive topics before, for those who had never dealt with this type of interview before. Because, for example, a journalist interview differs much from this qualitative sociological in-depth interview with this attentive listening. And this manual might be interesting for students as well. So for those who want to conduct any research in the sensitive topic or want to conduct any sensitive research, but never dealt with it before. Something like this.
Sarah, we cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I said we have time for one more quick question if anyone wants to jump in. Any final thoughts for Anna? Question, advice? Okay, well, thank you very much, Anna, for a really comprehensive presentation, and best of luck as you continue working on the manual. And
Thank you so
Sure.
much for your attention and your questions. Thank you.
so much.